So I had a career crisis. That's a definite career crisis, which, to be fair, gives me empathy for a lot of the people I work with now who are in career crisis for various reasons. I mean, a lot of them are in career crisis because COVID's come along and swept away their otherwise superb career. But for me, as I said, I thought I was going to join the Marines. That didn't happen, couldn't happen. So I was like, what do I do? I could go back to Shetland, but that felt like losing. It just felt like that would be a loser thing to do. I mean, it would have been fine, but that was the psychology. So I moved to Aberdeen because my brother lived there and worked offshore for an operator, Shell. So he had a flat here. Not here, I'm not in Aberdeen, but he had a flat in Aberdeen. And I just said, can I come and live with you for a few weeks while I work out what I'm going to do? But it was a really tricky time. I would have been, 2021. And he actually convinced me to go and sign on what was then called the dole. He said, look, I've paid my taxes working offshore because he earned reasonable money. And he said, you go and get some of my taxes back. And I didn't know any better. So I said, well, okay, because I didn't have a job. I had a wee bit of savings. So I went and signed on, and I signed on for a couple of weeks. And man, it was soul destroying. Like that feeling of purposelessness and not knowing what I was going to do, even though I did have some money. As I said, I'd saved some money. It was just brutal. And looking at these mainly pretty crappy jobs, to be honest. And yeah, that was an eye-opener for me. That was probably when I started to grow up a bit, was after uni, because you come out of that kind of bubble. I mean, I'd done some roughy-tufty jobs through uni. I'd worked with the bin men, driving diggers and picking up rubbish and stuff like that. So it's not like I'd been cosseted, but yeah. So that was what happened. I came out of university and just literally didn't know what to do, and realized I just need to get some kind of job here. I mean, I need to do something. And so I just went out and looked for anything I could get. The first actual job I got after university was actually a door security job. And it was weird because back in those days, I mean, I used to be fit and strong, and I used to be a fighter, etc. So to me, it seemed like a natural thing to do, just as a part-time thing. But it was actually at the student union, and it was a new company had come into town, and they had some kind of training program. Now, I don't think, I might be wrong, but most door companies and bouncers didn't get trained in those days. This would have been, I guess, was it the late 90s, 96, 97? But they put us through a training program, and it was some ex-army guy. And I kind of resonated with a lot of it. And the idea, again, of service kind of came in. I know people assume that doormen are just there to batter people and chat up girls or whatever. But to me, a big part of it was actually trying to look after the people in the venues, and also to look after the other guys and girls in your team, because we had plenty of door women as well. And I really enjoyed that. I actually really enjoyed that job. I got a lot out of it, and I'd like to think I gave a fair bit to it. But that was a part-time job, so I was looking for something else. And I naturally trained a fair bit at that time, so I ended up getting a gym instructor job in a probably the busiest Aberdeen gym at the time, the Warehouse. And that's sort of where the first entrepreneurial thing happened to me. I mean, in danger of interviewing myself again here, Steve, feel free to jump in.
No, go for it.
So what happened really is, it's not so much that I decided to launch my own kind of venture. I was working, basically a minimum wage job in the daytime as an instructor, and then my door job at night that was better paid. And I was, that was pretty busy because I would start at 6 a.m. in the morning, and a lot of nights I would finish at 1 a.m. So I wasn't getting that much sleep. I was really highly occupied physically. But after a while, not long, I'd only been there a few months, I think. And I had one of my instructor clients say, oh, could you personally train me? And I'd seen some articles about personal trainers, one in particular stuck in my head, and I'd kind of thought it might be a cool thing to do. So I realized pretty quickly that the pay rate, if you like, a PT, even back then would have been £25 an hour, whereas I was on £5 or £6 an hour daytime rate as an instructor. And so I did the extra training, etc., required, and started just taking on my own PT clients as well as working as an instructor at the gym. And that was how my first kind of mini entrepreneurial venture got started. It was because people were asking me, people were saying, could you PT me? So yeah, you've put me through the gym's induction program, but I want to work with you longer term. So yeah, that's kind of how I actually got started in anything you could call entrepreneurialism. I don't know whether we should use that word, but you know what I mean? Like in your own little venture. Yeah.
No, cool. I always quite enjoy when people go through a journey, and actually you don't know the path that you're going to end up on. So you go and with the best of intentions that you try something, and if it works out, you pivot and then you keep changing. So, because when we first met, I think you had Thor Holt Limited, which was pitch and presentation training. How did you go from doing the PT to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, so I guess I can't remember the exact dates, but like in my later 20s, I had another, you could call it a career crisis, but it was more positive. I just somehow got into kind of personal development, reading and things. And through that, I'd found coaching, as in more like life coaching. And I ended up getting my own coach for a while. And I kind of went through a process of just having that proper consideration of what I might actually like to do now. Obviously, I didn't get into the Marines. I wasn't going to be doing that. I'd fallen into working on the door, and I'd fallen into gym instructing and PT. So what about if I was intentional? Like, what would I actually then do? I guess was the question. And I came up with some howlers. Like, I thought I could be a rock star or a pop star or something, but there was a slight challenge there in that I couldn't sing, or not particularly well. I thought about acting, and I wasn't so foolish as to think I could just go and be an actor.
Mm-hmm.
I went and joined an amateur dramatic group locally and did various plays and things, and then started applying for drama schools, and actually got into drama school in Sydney in Australia.
Wow.
And was over there for a wee while. It didn't work out particularly well. I loved Sydney, but school didn't work out for reasons that we won't go into in case somebody sues somebody. But it was a fantastic experience, and I ended up doing a 1-year kind of post-grad professional acting training in London. And I still do bits and pieces of acting. I do corporate stuff. That was a crucial part of the journey, though, because then going away, doing my acting training, then getting an agent. I got a pretty good agent, actually, but she was based up in Edinburgh. So I moved back from London with my then fiance, who I'd met in the meantime. And we moved back up into this part of the world, like Aberdeenshire. And from there, basically anyone who's been involved in acting will tell you, you don't instantly jump in and start earning a full-time living. That's just not the way it works. Supply and demand says it's a very oversupplied profession. So I was getting bits and pieces of work through my acting agent, but I needed to go back to the personal training. And I realized I needed to promote the personal training a bit more than I had before, because times had changed. There were more personal trainers around by now. When I'd done it, when I first started, there was just a handful of us in the whole city. And now there were tons of PTs, you know. So I asked somebody in the gym, a guy called Bob Keeler, who some people watching might have heard of.
For the people who don't know who he is, do you want to just give some context?
Okay, so Bob, he has been more recently, he was like the chairman of Scottish Enterprise. He's a very successful, what I'd call a real entrepreneur, not like me. But he's been involved in management buyouts, building and selling major companies.
Because it was Wood Group, I think, where I knew him from.
Wood Group, yes. Wood bought his company, PSN. So yeah, Bob's a phenomenally successful entrepreneur and a great mentor. So what happened is basically I asked Bob for some advice. He did better than that, Bob being Bob. He threw me one of his B-team speaking opportunities. Basically, a charity in Glasgow needed a keynote speaker in a week's time. So I'd asked about public speaking to promote my business, my PT business. He said, I can do better than that. He sent me this email with something like Thor's Challenge in the headline. And it was to speak at this thing in a week's time. And I'm like, oh my God. Because I'd had one previous experience of public speaking and had found it really scary. And he didn't just drop me right in it. He gave me some structure. He gave me some old notes from a course he'd been on, coffee stain notes. And I went away and worked something up. And then he pressure tested me on the day. I went down to Glasgow with my wife and my kid, and I presented it. And it went pretty well. I mean, it could have been better, of course. But I kind of felt it was a transformative process, and I got more and more into speaking. I did various kind of B-team gigs for him, things he couldn't do because of diary clashes, started getting some of my own gigs, started running some of my own little workshops. And one of the common denominators, Steve, was that I was getting asked by like universities, for example. Bob and I would go and deliver something together by this stage, and universities would ask me to come back and just work with the students around confidence and confidence to present.
Okay.
I guess it's back to that service thing and just loving to see other people come through. You know, when I was a PT, I would teach like a menopausal housewife to throw a left hook that could drop a doorman. And that would give me a great feeling. And it's the same thing when you can help someone get past their nerves and present well in an interview, or, I don't know, a pitch team that's never won any business to go out and win business. Okay. Just a great feeling.